Hello, everyone. Welcome to another recorded discussion in assessment and learning too. And for this video, we will be talking about assessment in affective domain. And these are the learning outcomes for this topic. At the end of this, you are expected to recognize affective taxonomy and educational objectives, create measurable objectives for the affective domain, and cite and develop instruments and methods for assessing effective learning. Before we dig deeper, let us have this verse from Mark chapter 8, verse 36, which states that, "What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world but loses his soul?" Indeed, what does our learner profit if they learn all cognitive and psychomotor domain, however, loses their affective side? This verse tells us the importance of assessing, incorporating affective levels in our learning. We always have heard the word schooled, educated, but not well mannered. We want our learners to learn not just the contents, not just those skilled or hard skills. We also want them to incorporate with this learning the different soft skills they can develop as they learn the different competencies we have in our curriculum. So remember that when we assess affective domain, we develop soft skills, which are from social and emotional learning, emotional intelligence, positive discipline, and growth mindset. So as future educators, I would like you to consider the different categories of soft skills. We have social skills, self management, academic soft skills, and approaches to learning. The different traits or the different strands are in this page, and I want you to pause the video and check how many of these strands applies to you. How many of strand applies, or how many strands in social skills apply to you, self-management, academic soft skills, approaches to learning. All right. So by now, I hope that you were able to count how many strands or how many of these observable traits you have already in mind. Note that we should accomplish first, or we should have this first before we can expect our learners to have them. Now, this is the taxonomy of affective domain, which was originally created by Krathwohl in 1964 and cited by Newman and Friedman in 2010. So, as you can see, the pyramid tells us that the peak or the highest level of affective domain is characterizing. Now, before the learner can reach that peak, we should understand that it should start with receiving, responding, valuing, organizing before characterizing. So the words there would be: for receiving, they choose to listen to you; responding, they conform, they react; valuing, they initiate and somehow also reports; some organize, they do orders, they synthesize in their own; and characterize, it's when they question or they influence other to do that trade. This is an example of how can we expect our learners to have behavioral trait under affective domain. Here for receiving, this is in the context of teaching mathematics. Here for receiving, we have when student will pay attention when the teacher introduces the new concept or formulas. Responding is when they volunteer to answer questions and they actively engage. Valuing is when students consistently completes the math task and submit them in a before even before the deadline. Organize is when they set the regular schedules for um, for example remedial class or tutors additional time to learn math. And of course, characterization is when they uses those mathematical concepts they have in their daily decisions. So, as you have observed, it is not just like the same with cognitive and psychomotor that we can rate them by numeric. We can also rate affective domain by numeric. However, it is very somehow subjective. How do we make it objective? We use different methods. At the same time, we use different behavioral verbs. So these are the different behavioral verbs that we can use when we make our learning uh, objectives. Remember that the Batatag curriculum of DEP and now, the Department of Education, um, still has the KSA or the CAP. KSA stands for Knowledge, Skills, and Attitude, and CAP stands for Cognitive, Affective, and Psychomotor. Hence, even in a new curriculum, we still acknowledge that in every content there should be soft skills that they can develop throughout. So these are the behavioral verbs for receiving. We can use the word attend, accept, develop, recognize. So this could be found in our learning objectives. Responding, we can have complete, comply, cooperate, discuss, examine, obey, respond, and so on and so forth. So now, what are the methods of assessing affective domain? First is teacher's observation. This is to observe approach behavior and avoidance behavior. So these are positive behavior and negative behavior. So we can have it unstructured or structured. Structured is you just write it in your notebooks or even in your journals, for example. And remember that we teachers are the one to accomplish this one. It's not the student. So we write all observations we have from them, then we put them in a in any piece of paper, and that is unstructured. If we want it to be structured, then we use those tools, for example, the checklist. But we have to identify first what do we want them to, what we expect them to behave, and that could be an additional task somehow, because you have we have to identify the items in that checklist. Not just checklist, but you can also use rating scales. Now, another method we can use for effective domain is the student self-report. It could be through student interview, which enables teacher ask and the student interaction, allowing clarification and deeper insight into learners' view. It can also be through surveys and questionnaires, which we can use as previously mentioned, the constructive response, where students express their own answers, or selected response, where they offer fixed choices to maintain objectivity or anonymity. All right. So when we let our students do the student self-report, we do not expect them somehow to be really somehow to be to have the same understanding of the question we gave to them. In other words, for example, if we ask our students the question like why I like or dislike mathematics, we open ourselves to possible reflections of the student why they don't like such a subject. Remember that we are asking for their openness. especially if it is a unstructured type of report, and we should be open also for their answers. The next one is peer rating. I was able to discuss this already during our authentic assessment discussion. Peer rating is somehow used frequently because of the biases in it. But remember that peer rating can help us identify those groups or those group members who are not helping their leaders. We can, but somehow, even if it has a biases on it, we can still use this to verify, as I've said, the performance of a group member. It would be possible if we give them peer rating. It will be possible if we give them observable traits. We will be asking for observable traits that will be rated by a group leader or another group member. Let us not just ask them, for example, 10 out of 10, 100 out of 100, because the rating could be different. Now, let's proceed to the tools for assessing effective domain. So remember that methods are ways on how we can do it, and tools are really the evaluation tools that we can use to assess effective domain. As I've said earlier, mentioned earlier already, we can use the checklist. So here, they can just check earlier what you did also during the identification of those strands per soft skills. That is also an example of checklist. We also have rating scale. So here, they're just gonna rate themselves 1 to 5, whether they are happy during the mathematics class, they get bored, or they enjoy solving word problem. Also, for we have Likert scale. So the difference between rating scale and Likert scale is that rating could just be any random numbers. Likert scale is not really that random, because when the student pick 5 or 4, that means they strongly agree or they just agree. Now, there's also what we call semantic differential scale, in which they will just pick in between the two options. Could be, for example, here, their attitudes or traits towards mathematics subject could be boring, or it could also be interesting. And we also have the sentence completion, on which we guide them to expressing their thoughts effectively. For example, in this case, we have, I think, mathematics as a subject is, and then they're going to complete the entire sentence. That's for them to express their thoughts as well. And we also have the students' written reflection. So it's all up to you if during the reflection you're gonna guide them, or you're gonna have a guide questions, depending on what are you letting them to, what are you asking them to write a reflection about. For example, it could be after the performance task, or it could be during an activity. So, or after submission of a product or process based output. So after that, you can ask a reflection, and it's all up to you if you can guide them. If you will give guide questions to them. But it is always good to give guide questions, so that as teachers, when we rate the reflections, we can just see in their writings what are we expect them to write. So that's it. And those are the methods and tools for assessing effective domain. A formative assessment will be posted in our Google Classroom for this topic. Thank you so much. And another activity also will be given during our classroom on-site discussion. Thank you.